G'day to all. Welcome. So it is 6:30 sharp, and as I'm sit like a Swiss clock, I'm now ready to go, ready to start for tonight's stream, which will be on methodological coherence and consistency for the dissertation. And I will of course also give you an update, an AI update for this week. So my own update plus updates from the AI front coming from this week. So prior to that, just need to do one thing to make sure everything is as I would like it to be. Sorry about this, but no, it's all right. So happy to be here today. I hope you have had a good week, and I hope you had a good time since last time. Hi Rachel, I see 5 connections. So 5 connections. Not sure who exactly is connected just yet, but welcome, and I'm really glad to see that we are quite a few already for today. So I will do as I do each week. So tonight's theme is on methodology, consistency and coherence, and for this I will give you the my directions of what needs to be considered, and I will also show you and run with you a few prompts, 4 big prompts that could be helpful. Good evening, Shuhei, nice to see you. Nice to see you tonight. When I prepared for tonight, I was thinking of the exchanges we have had in the past few days on your methodology choices. So if you're okay with this, if you're not, I will do otherwise. But if you're okay with this, I will run your methodology choices with the prompts I will show later on. So the 4 prompts on methodological consistency. But prior to that, a couple of things relating to my week and to some advances on the AI front for this week, irrespective of me. So first of all, my own week. So this week was very rich, actually. Very rich, not just that it was very busy, although it was, but something, a number of things were very, very interesting and very encouraging in relation to my tools, to the 5 tools I have developed in the past 6 months. So this week I did 2 demos with 2 schools. I will not give the names right now because I do not want to spoil anything and risk ruining possible discussions with those 2 schools. But I ran 2 demos, and both schools are more than interested. So for now, they want to test the tools by themselves and see what the tools they can achieve, and also how they could use them, how they could implement and use them, knowing that my 5 solutions, whichever the number they take, be it 1, 2, 3, 4 or 5, my solutions are not just extra bricks, extra technological tools, extra software in their offering for students. It should be more than that. It's an infrastructure for governance, so that implementing those tools will require that schools revisit and reconsider the entire governance of their end of studies dissertation and internship reports. This means when I'm speaking of governance, I'm not speaking of the content per se, but how they want it to be orchestrated, organized, and how they want humans to be involved, and what the role of these humans should be, how far AI should go and should be used, which means those 5 tools have a major implication on the organization of labor, of academic labor, and they must be considered in this way. So I ran 2 demos, and the 2 schools asked for a test account, which I created for each of them, and I think they've started testing. Not everybody has, but my feeling is that they have started testing, and then they will revert back to me at some point when they know more about what they want to do or do not want to do with them. So it is very, very encouraging. Likewise, another schools called me for help, so asked for my help for something similar, revisiting the governance of the dissertation under the purview of going through national accreditations and recognition and degree recognition, as I have developed in the past 20 years a certain understanding, if not expertise, at this, and my tools would be part of the whole thing. So I spoke with the dean this week, and soon, so not next week but the one after, I'll have a more operational and executive meeting with the current person in charge of this, and who seemingly has an interest in extra support. So it is encouraging. Likewise, a 4th school for this week. For a 4th school this week, I spoke with someone who's been a friend for 20 years. It always helps. So he's been a friend for 20 years, and something very interesting was that he told me, all this sounds so much like you. It seems that it's your true you talking. You are in your, let's say, natural professional environment. Your approach does not sound commercial, but really something authentic and with an irresistible offer. So I like it. And as a result, he said that he would talk to his dean of my tools and myself, and then we'll see what comes next, what can happen. Likewise, I was very flattered, very honored when he asked me if I would agree to have a case study done with my story, my things, for his MBA students. So it does not mean it will be coming straight ahead, but it was asked, and yes, please. I just hope that the case study does not highlight big failures, big errors, but tells a nice story. And you always prefer people talking about you in good terms and for good things happening rather than for what you've done wrong. But you never know. And I really hope that it will be for the best, for the better, and not for the worse. But we'll see. Likewise, I was also contacted by there were two things happening concurrently. Two schools. One is an Indian university having a branch in France and delivering online courses, and for academic requirements in France and to comply with French regulations, they need on their board a director with French qualifications or qualifications recognized by French authorities, and they wanted me to take on this role. So I spoke with them, and I need to call, which I will do on Monday, so tomorrow, someone who is currently working on the Paris premises, so as to see what she is doing and how things are, so I can have a better idea of what could be expected of me and what I could do, knowing that I do not want an executive role. So I'm already trying to develop my business, which should be launched very, very shortly. I know I've been saying this for a while already, but now we're really close to a proper start. All we need is validation of all the legal documents by the 4 partners. And once the 4 partners have approved everything, our solicitors and our chartered accountants will be able to proceed and register the business. So if we are prompt, if the 4 partners are prompt, it could be done at the soonest this week. If we're not prompt, then I have no idea exactly how much it would take, but it can be very quick. It can be. So for that reason, yes, I did not really feel like taking on an executive role, but being on an advisory role as a board member, as a director is okay for me. Likewise, I said there were 2 concurrent things. And the second thing is that a friend of mine, so we had the same PhD supervisor in Manchester, spoke of me with one of his former students who is currently launching an executive education institute in Ivory Coast, and who needs a French-speaking consultant, understanding academic requirements, but also capable of talking to senior executives and perhaps whales, if you see what I mean. So we had a talk, a very interesting talk, and we might well do something together. I just have a very good friend who has always dreamt of that, and I didn't want to steal this from him, so I have involved him in this, and we should have a further conversation tomorrow, so as to see where each of us would like to fit and could do, and then we'll see. And another thing is, and I do not know if 𝗬𝗢𝗙𝗓, you are online tonight, but 𝗬𝗢𝗙𝗓, who has always been attending my streams, defended this week. So he successfully defended his DBA thesis on Thursday, and has been a doctor in business administration for now 3 days. And congratulations on this big milestone in his academic and professional life. So when you start with a thesis, you have ideas of what you would like it to bring to your life in the future, but you never know. You never know first how long it will take you. So when you start, of course, you hope that it will not take you for too long, but there are a number of things that are out of your control, and you have some expectations at the beginning, but over time your environment evolves and changes so that what you eventually do might slightly differ from what you were intending at the beginning. And at the end of the day, the contribution is not necessarily the one you were initially expecting. It does not mean it's bad, it just means it's often a new, different life that starts once you have defended, and hopefully for the better, an extension of your current life, but at times a new, different one. So congratulations on 𝗬𝗢𝗧𝗛𝗘𝗏 on this big achievement. Then another of my DBA students, she is about to resubmit her thesis. So this week she finalized the letter to reviewers. So she was required a number of changes, and we have been working on a schedule of responses to reviewers, which took a bit of time and was a bit of an effort, but she's done. So now we are waiting on an approval of a co-supervisor, and once we have all approved, then she can resubmit, which might happen this week, which means that she might be able to defend within the next 2 months or so. Again, some good news, great news. Also, someone else, another of my doctoral students who's not here tonight, but will be attending the French stream. So tonight she's flying. We have been working together, we've been working hard on revising a paper for a journal, and now she is finalizing the revisions so we can resubmit by the end of the week to come. So again, another milestone is about to be reached shortly for her. This is for my week, for my news. Now on the AI and technology front, there have been a few updates or some news, some of which you might have noticed and some of which you might have not seen. First, this week, something very important, which I think has occurred, is that India has expressed a strong willingness to position itself as an actor in AI, in the AI world, in between or as an alternative to the hegemony of US models and Chinese models. What is very interesting for India is that this country has more than 100 languages, and a strong imperative is that AI models, so LLMs, be trained in those 100 plus languages, which for now is not the case, as we've got basically American LLMs, 𝗕𝗘𝗙𝗧𝗛𝗘𝗏, Claude, Gemini, Perplexity, that are 80% trained in English and to a much lesser extent in other languages, and that also have a strong North American bias in how they process requests and deliver results. On the other hand, we've got DeepSeek, the Chinese model, which is the second dominant model, with a different business model based on open source LLMs. So LLMs, models that are diffused for free, which users can amend and which can be installed on premises. So on your own servers, I would not say on your own computers, because installing requires a lot of memory and a lot of bandwidth and a lot of RAM and chips. And this takes me to something which has been totally unnoticed, which was the launch by HP, Hewlett-Packard, so HP, the launch of something called HP ZGX Nano Box, which is nearly as big as a Mac Mini, just like half a book, or let's say you take a dictionary and it's half a dictionary in terms of size. And this is a sort of a very mini, if not nano, server where you can install and run an LLM by yourself without needing, those big closets with electricals, with chip servers and stuff. And I think this will be a big revolution, which is, like I said, totally unnoticed. Nobody has spoken of it. I saw it somewhere. I just have no idea how much it costs. No idea. I'm intrigued to know, though. And this is important, I think, because the rush, so the AI rush for chips and GPUs all around the world has resulted in a shortage of chips, so that prices for any electricals, any electronics and IT devices have been inflated and have been skyrocketing in the past few weeks, and I doubt this will improve. I really doubt it. If you remember, OpenAI signed a $100 billion contract with NVIDIA to develop its own chips, and this week NVIDIA announced that they would divide this investment by 3. So this investment is shifting from 100 billions to 30 billions, and this means that NVIDIA is no longer supplying mainly OpenAI with chips, but also, and that's very important, I think, very interesting, but also India. So Indian companies, as they wish to develop their own models. And all this will also require more and more data centers, as we discussed last week and the weeks before. And so extra data centers, but also more energy to feed those data centers. And this is where there is a French company that has been testing this week, that has been testing optical technologies for data centers. So in a nutshell, optical technology would enable to drive less electricity for enhanced performance for data centers. And this would be consistent with their investment undertaken by French company Mistral AI last week in Sweden to erect a data center that would be fed with renewable energies and that would not need too much energy for cooling its system. So here we are, I think, at a point where the need for data centers and the need for electricity are out of control and require that we rethink the way we feed them and the way we actually generate this energy, this electricity. And this is, I think, a company to follow. I can't remember its name. I should though. But I think we will hear about this company again in the near future. And also something else that happened this week. Two things concurrently or nearly concurrently. On the 17th of February, Anthropic released its new model, Sonnet 4.6, after Opus 4.6 was released a couple of weeks prior. I can't remember when exactly, but Sonnet 4.6 is supposedly, or was supposedly, the best, the strongest model, so large language model ever, and was alleged to be capable of writing the best possible codes and to be engaged in reasoning in a way that had never been achieved. And 2 days later, on the 19th of February, Google discreetly released Gemini 3.1 Pro. And Gemini 3.1 Pro now is announced or is discussed as the best model ever. Even stronger, more powerful, more capable than Sonnet 4.6 released by Anthropic 2 days prior. Honestly, I do not know which one is really better than the other, but for sure there has been a big shift. And I sort of accidentally tested this Gemini 3.1 Pro. Honestly, I tested it accidentally, so I did not know that it was released when I started testing it, because the release was not accompanied with a big announcement. And I can tell that indeed it is capable of big abstraction, capable of reasoning with concepts, capable of relating concepts to actual actions and situations, and it is capable of fixing its own mistakes. For those who might have seen Opus 4.6 released by Anthropic, when you ask for solutions, in particular when you are doing some coding, it suggests a solution, then reflects on its feasibility, and if actually there is any doubt or any ambiguity on this matter, then Claude tells you, oh no, sorry, let's do otherwise, blah blah blah. Here with Gemini 3.1 Pro, it is nearly the same, but whilst Claude fixes its own mistakes, Gemini 3.1 Pro is capable of revisiting its entire way of thinking and fixing not just with a patch somewhere, but saying, no, let's step backwards and let's reconsider the whole thing so as to avoid this problem. And I have witnessed to something very, very promising, honestly. And I read today that OpenAI is now considering releasing a new version of ChatGPT, so ChatGPT 5.3, that should be capable of competing with both Sonnet 4.6 and Gemini 3.1 Pro. I would not be surprised if it happened in the upcoming few days, but I have no idea when exactly. And it will be interesting to see how they are deploying more and more engineering to develop the best model. So this is for the main news on the AI front for this week. So for today, like I said, I'd like to discuss with you the coherence and consistency of your methods, because we saw in the past 2 weeks, 2 streams, that methodological choices should not be made without grounds. So a methodological choice should be the consequence of other decisions made before. So tonight I will not discuss methods per se, so this will come in subsequent sessions, but tonight I will discuss and we will test structure. So the design of your research project associated with methods. So research is not a toolbox, it is a structure, and a structure must be internally consistent. And as we discussed recently, everything proceeds from the research question. So here we are in a vertical direction, and this is this vertical direction, vertical coherence that we will discuss tonight. With 4 prompts I will develop with you. What is important is that everything proceeds from your research question. So what you want to answer is the thing that guides everything in your research. From the question, a theory will proceed, and this theory will give you the analytical focus. So what should fall within your remit, what should not, what you are scrutinizing, what you are leaving aside your study. And this will naturally lead you to identify the data you need, so the type of data, and then the associated methods to collect and process this data. And based on this, the claims you can make. The claims you can make, the conclusions you can pretend to draw from this. So I will now let's try with the first prompt. The first prompt I'll share with you, and I'd like you to give me a sec. I will run it with Gemini. Here we are. Here I'm sharing my screen. You see Gemini, but first I would like you to see this. So the vertical coherence diagnostic prompt. Here their idea is to test the architecture. So the architecture of the thesis or the dissertation. So their idea is to identify whether there are inconsistencies, things that have not been thought well enough, that are not clear enough, not explicit enough, or that are ambiguous. Then we can identify what the cause for this is. If it is a conceptual lacuna, if it is an operational paucity, or if it is an epistemological problem. And then it is important that we understand it is not a technical problem, actually. It is structural to the thesis and structural to your own thought as well. So here the prompt says, you are a structural coherence examiner. So it's important giving a role. Task. You diagnose the vertical coherence of my research design. Do not propose corrections or improvements. It is just as diagnostics. And the coherence of the research design is through, as an input, research question, theoretical lens, analytical focus or hypothesis, data, method, intended claims. So, intended claims will be the type of answer we think we can bring or we can make. And the output format will be for each level. We need to know if it is coherent, partially coherent, or totally incoherent, and identify the weakest link. Then one analytical paragraph explaining where there might be a misalignment, why this misalignment creates structural fragility, what epistemic tension it reveals, what intellectual inconsistency which will undermine the persuasiveness and strength of the study, and then an overall structural stability score, or not score, but let's say, score, stable, fragile, or unstable. So let's take here the prompt with Gemini. I'll take a new conversation here. Input, then second part here. And here I've got a question for you, Shuhei. Do you agree if we use your your research project to run this prompt? If you are, then we'll do with it. If you're not, then I will take a different one. So I do not know if you are typing or not. Just checking on a different screen. I don't know. So as I do not have permission, oh, you agree, great. Okay, so input research question is how are management control systems reconfigured in growth phases. Oops. Theoretical lens. Can't remember for the analytical lens. We could say management control systems literature. So let's say Anthony Merchant. Analytical focus or hypothesis. MCS evolve contingent to the momentum in company life cycle. Data interviews with let's say with key decision makers, and then we'll see what comes out from this. Method, data coding. Intended claims, intended conclusion or observation would be, if I'm just trying to recollect what I read this morning. Just trying to recollect. The claims, claim could be that MCS changes its focus and shape depending on new constraints imposed by the growth phase. And then we'll see what comes out from Gemini. So, vertical coherence assessment. So I'm sharing, I hope you can see well. Yeah. So what it says is, as a structural coherence examiner, I have diagnosed your research design based on the alignment between your research question, theoretical framework, and empirical strategy. Vertical coherence, research question coherent, theoretical lens partially coherent, we'll see that soon, analytical focus coherent, data partially coherent, we'll see why, method coherent, intended claims coherent. Okay. The weakest link is the theoretical lens. Anthony Merchant is the primary point of friction. While these authors provide foundational definitions of MCS, their frameworks are traditionally static or functionalist, relying on them to explain the process of reconfiguration, which is dynamic and longitudinal, creates a mismatch with the momentum described in your focus. Structural diagnosis. The misalignment occurs between the dynamic nature of the research question, focused on reconfiguration and momentum, and the static nature of the chosen theoretical lens, just said. Anthony Merchant emphasized their existence and types of controls rather than the mechanisms of transition between growth phases. This creates structural fragility because your intended claims suggest a process-oriented evolution. Yet, your theoretical tools are designed for structural snapshots. Furthermore, there is an epistemic tension between the interpretive data source, interviews with decision makers, and the contingency-based focus. You're looking for contingent evolution, often a causal, objectivist claim, through the lens of individual perceptions, which risks a gap between the objective constraints you claim to find and the subjective narratives you are actually collecting. Overall, structural stability fragile. Would you like me to analyze how different theoretical lens, such as Simon's levels of control or Miller and Friesen's life cycle models, would impact this vertical alignment? Okay, let's try. But I will take the same prompt, but change the analytical lens. And here I'm using, by the way, Gemini 3.1, the one released, the latest release. So let's try here. Simon's levers of control and levers of accountability, which was published 10 years later. And the analytical focus evolved continued to the momentum in company life cycle, interviews with key decision makers, and perhaps at some point we'll have to rediscuss this. So let's see what is coming out. Here, let's see. Vertical coherence assessment, so research questions to coherent, theoretical lens, yes, analytical focus, partially, data, coherent, method, coherent, intended claims, coherent. We have enhanced overall coherence. It's just their analytical focus, which may be still problematic. The analytical focus remains the weakest link, so it has slightly changed. While Simon's framework is excellent for explaining how systems are used, your focus leans heavily on the contingency logic, implying that the life cycle state dictates the configuration. This creates a friction point between the framework centered on managerial agency, Simon's, and a focus centered on deterministic environmental pressures, life cycle theory. So I think this is where we are perhaps too strong, and we will change something soon so as to see what comes out. Structural diagnosis. The misalignment occurs between the agentic nature of Simon's levers and the deterministic tone of contingent evolution in their analytical focus. Simon's levers of control and levers of accountability are designed to explore how managers choose to navigate tensions. However, by framing the focus through contingent momentum, the design risks treating the growth phase as an external force that mandates specific shapes rather than a context for strategic choice. This creates structural fragility because the constraints mentioned in your claims may be interpreted as objective realities, whereas your data and theory are better suited to capturing the subjective enactment of these controls. The epistemic tension revealed is one between environmental determinism of the stage growth, this dictates the MCS, and strategic choice. Managers reconfigure the levers to manage growth. Overall structural stability stable, with a caveat regarding the framing of contingency. So here I know that what I've mentioned here is not exactly what you wrote, as you didn't specifically write contingency, but let's now try with something different, with 𝗕𝗛𝗂 approach to entrepreneurial finance in startups. MCS evolve contingent to the momentum. Let's say evolve alongside, and here it will be slightly different. So I'm making two minor changes here. 𝗕𝗛𝗂's work typically centers equity structures and financing cycles, seed series I. I'm not sure. I think here there's an error on 𝗕𝗛𝗂, so I'm just going here and trying to collect just the abstract of his book. constant three-dimensional. So I want the full book, not just cost value and entrepreneurial venture journey. Yeah. Oops, I made an error. Okay, I'll fix it later. Back to Gemini here. Yeah, here. So let's take this. Oops, no, that's not what I wanted. Then back to the prompt. Where is the prompt? Okay, yeah, here it is. And the prompt will come up here. Oh no, sorry. I'm all over the place here. I'm not saying you must do that. I'm not saying Shuhei. I'm just trying to show what those prompts can reveal. Input Chamasian's approach up, which says this, and then we'll see. And here, intended claims, incoherent. As structural here. Research question coherent, theoretical lens coherent, analytical focus partially coherent, data coherent, method coherent, intended claims incoherent. Okay. The weakest link. The intended claims represent the weakest link. The theoretical lens, Chamasian, explicitly rejects the passive recognition of cost as mere reactions to growth, yet their intended claims fall back on a reactive logic where MCS changes based on constraints imposed by the growth phase. This contradicts the core of the chosen theory. Structural diagnosis. The misalignment occurs between the proactive value creation nature of the theoretical lens and the deterministic reactive nature of the intended claims. Chamasian's framework views cost and controls as active tools for creating and capturing value across a three-dimensional platform. However, the intended claims describe their MCS as a subordinate structure that merely reshapes itself to fit new constraints. This creates structural fragility because the research effectively uses a strategic advantage theory to support a passive adaptation conclusion. The epistemic tension revealed is between theological agency, the MCS as a purposeful driver of the venture's future, and environmental determinism, the MCS as a response to life cycle pressures. By framing the output as a reaction to constraints, their study ignores the catalyst and intellectual capital dimensions central to the theoretical lens. Overall structural stability fragile. Here, I'll stop sharing my screen for a sec. Here, just be relieved, be reassured. I'm not saying that your research is weak or whatsoever. I'm just showing, based on intuitions we have regarding research design, how the alignment question is important and why it is important. Here, on purpose, I showed things that are not necessarily coherent, not perfectly coherent, so that we we see to what we need to pay attention, what needs to be scrutinized. So So that's it. But what we've discussed and the things on which we have exchanged regarding your own work is not a big deal, not that problematic. So you can be relieved with this. Then something else is that when you choose a methodology, you sacrifice something. Every methodology sacrifices something, which is not an error, it is a choice. You decide to study something in a certain way, and you decide not to study something else. So that this relinquishing of something is structural to the choices you make, so structural to the thesis. You cannot avoid it. It is not a problem in itself, but it creates a boundary. It creates a boundary which limits the reach of the conclusions you can make. So because you have to make choices, because you cannot do everything, because you have to leave a number of things aside, you will not be able to reach the most universal conclusions ever. So be clear with that. And here, once we're clear with the fact that we set boundaries by choosing methods, I'm showing you this new prompt, and then we'll run it again. So here, trade-off exposure and boundary diagnostic. Your role, you're a methodological boundary analyst. Your task, you're exposed the epistemic sacrifice and the boundary of generalization of my design without suggesting alternatives. That's not the point. The input will be the same. So research question, method, sample data, findings, output format, primary epistemic strength, primary epistemic sacrifice, level of generalizability, which could be non-contextual, analytical, statistical. Fourth, risk of overclaiming, low, medium, high. Fifth one, analytical paragraph explaining why the sacrifice is inherent, how it limits transferability where extrapolation would become illegitimate. That is, when you start to overclaim, actually, or when you stop generalizing. Now, let's try with this prompt, and we will take, Gemini, we will do the same. Research question, how are MCS reconfigured during growth phases? Method will be interviews, sample. So let's say for now, key decision makers, and we know that this is not very clear. Data, qualitative, findings still to come, but yet MCS evolve alongside corporate life cycle as evidenced by the growth phase. So then let's see what comes out with this boundary, so this trade-off and boundary diagnostics. Okay, so as a methodological boundary analyst, I have mapped the epistemological parameters and inherent limitations of your research design. Primary epistemic strength, interpretive depth. The design excels at capturing the teleological reasoning of decision makers. This means their reasoning with a purpose or seeking for a finality, a direction. It reveals the why behind reconfiguration by surfacing the mental models, perceived pressures, and strategic intentionality that purely quantitative snapshots of control systems would miss. That's a great thing. Primary epistemic sacrifice, processual objectivity. By relying solely on retrospective or concurrent interviews, the design sacrifices observational verification of actual MCS usage. But that's not your point, so you're not interested in this usage, so you're sacrificing this. It prioritizes the narrative of change over the materiality of change, potentially conflating managerial rhetoric or espoused theory with their actual theory and use within the organization. So here you need to agree that you might miss what is actually happening, and perhaps that you might be, let's say, told a nice story by those people. Level of generalizability, analytical. The findings allow for the refinement of theoretical constructs. For instance, how growth is cognitively processed into control, rather than statistical projection across a population. Risk of overclimbing, median. That's good to know. So that's good to know. It would be a problem if it said that the risk is high. Median. Methodological boundary analysis. The sacrifice of objective longitudinal tracking is inherent because the research question seeks to understand reconfiguration, a process often driven by the subjective sense-making of leadership during high-velocity growth. This limits transferability because their identified MCS evolutions are inextricably tied to the specific idiosyncrasies and cognitive biases of their interviewed elite. What one seer perceives as a growth constraint requiring formalization, another might view as a creative tension to be left unmanaged. Consequently, extrapolation becomes illegitimate if the findings are presented as a universal roadmap or a deterministic law of corporate life cycles. The design cannot claim that phase X causes control Y, but only that certain decision makers perceive a need for control Y when they narrate their experience of phase X. And here, if we agree on this restricted analysis, then it is no problem. But if you hope to arrive at a universal law of corporate life cycles, then the approach is not the right one, and you would overclimb. I do not totally agree with everything which is said here. Here it says the design cannot, but only certain decision. It says that you can only determine that certain decision makers perceive a need for control Y when they narrate their experience of phase X. It's not exactly that certain decision makers. So here you are trying. Here, depending on the data, and we can change it a bit, depending on the data, you might arrive at things that are slightly different. So here I will take data quality. So here, let's say open-ended. I know that you're not conducting open-ended interviews, but open-ended interviews involved in the design and reconfiguration of MCS sample anyone involved, not just CEOs, and then we'll see what the result now is, as we have slightly refined the point. So we have not made big changes, just refined a few points. So here, interesting, as a methodological boundary analyst, I've mapped the epistemological parameters and inherent limitations of research design, specifically focusing on the inclusion of a broader stakeholder base. Interesting, it has considered this. Primary epistemic strength, multivocality. By interviewing a range of decision makers beyond the CRO, the design captures the internal friction and distributed agency of MCS reconfigurations. It allows for a 360-degree view of how controls are negotiated and implemented across different functional silos rather than just how they are envisioned at the top. And this is a conversation we had. Primary epistemic sacrifice, convergence and intersubjectivity. By prioritizing open-ended, diverse perspectives, the design sacrifices structural consensus. The truth of the MCS reconfiguration becomes fragmented across different actors. What the CFO described as the new system may be perceived by a product lead as administrative noise, making it difficult to define a single objective state of the system at any given growth phase. Level of generalizability. Analytical. The findings provide a theoretical template for how various roles interact during growth rather than a predictable model for all firms. I think we agree on this. Risk of overclaiming, medium, again. Here, methodological boundary analysis, and that's where it's interesting. This sacrifice is inherent because growth and control are socially constructed experiences within a firm. Okay, by inviting anyone involved, you guarantee a divergence of narratives that cannot be easily reconciled into a linear life cycle model. This limits transferability because the reconfiguration patterns you find are deeply contingent on the organizational culture and the power dynamics between the specific individuals interviewed. For instance, a firm with a dominant engineering lead will reconfigure differently than one led by venture capital requirements. Interesting. Extrapolation becomes illegitimate if your attempt to present those findings as an objective mandatory evolution of the corporate life cycle. However, you can claim how a specific constellation of actors responded to growth, but you cannot claim that the growth phase itself necessitated those specific structural changes. Now, I would just like to change one thing to be closer to what you are intending to do. Open-ended interviews with semi-structured. And then we'll see what comes out. By shifting to semi-structured interviews and a broader sample of key decision makers, you've altered the reliability, validity, balance of your inquiry. Here, primary epistemic strength, operational granularity. The design captures the mechanics of implementation. By interviewing those actually involved in the design and reconfiguration, you move beyond high-level strategy to uncover the technical and social friction points where growth is translated into specific budgetary reporting or performance metrics. And here we're close to what you were intending to do at the beginning when you were mentioning some quantitative data as a secondary data. And that's, you do not need the data itself, but you need to see how it is translated and how people view it. Primary epistemic sacrifice, diachronic precision. Because the design relies on interviews, likely cross-sectional, yeah, that's it, to explain an evolution longitudinal, it sacrifices temporal objectivity. You are substituting real-time observation of a system's evolution with the reconstructed memories of participants. That's true. This introduces hindsight bias, where respondents logically reconnect past events to justify the current configuration, potentially smoothing over the chaotic, non-linear realities of growth. Well, that's true, but it depends also on the questions you're asked. So if you ask people questions on their concern at the time, if you ask them questions on their currents at the time, their constraints at the time, you might avert or reduce that bias. So there is a bias, but we can bypass it. Level of generalizability, analytical. The study can offer a theoretical map of the tensions involved in scaling controls, which can be tested in similar context. Risk of overclaiming, medium, again. Methodological boundary analysis. The sacrifice of temporal tracking is inherent because qualitative interviews capture a frozen moment of reflection rather than a continuous stream of organizational change. While you gain deep insights into the logic of reconfiguration, you lose their ability to verify if their MCS truly revolved alongside the life cycle or if the changes were sudden, reactive, or decoupled from the growth phase entirely. This limits transferability because the evolutionary path you document is filtered through the collective sense-making of a specific project team, possibly. Their successes and failures are tied to their unique professional backgrounds and the firm's specific market conditions. Extrapolation would become illegitimate if you were to present the findings as a predictive life cycle model. You cannot claim that phase B follows phase A as a natural law. You can only demonstrate how specific actors navigated the transition between those perceived phases and their unique organizational reality. It is true, so I do not totally agree. So here, what happens is that you can highlight a number of questions that are raised when moving from phase A to phase B. It does not mean that phase A will cause phase B, but while shifting from one to the other, a number of questions, a number of tensions arise that deserve particular attention. And here it is no problem. Here it is scientifically acceptable. So this was the trade-off and the fact that we are setting boundaries to your study, and you must agree. You must agree on those boundaries. Then the next one is on causality diagnostic, claims and causality legitimacy audit. So here is the next prompt here associated with possible legitimate or illegitimate claims. There are some there are some risks with claims that might be too strong or too big, where causal language is used without causal design. So saying, oh, A causes B, whilst your research design does not suggest this or does not allow you to, claim that. Likewise, generalization without any sampling logic, or interpretation without mechanism. This means you give an interpretation, but not the grounds for this interpretation, and not how other people could make a similar interpretation to yours. And here I'm now sharing with you this prompt, and we will run it next. You can see here. So your role, you're a scientific legitimacy examiner. Task: evaluate whether my intended claims, especially causal language, are supported by my design. Do not reformulate or correct the claims. Input: research question, design, data structure, sampling logic, intended claims, temporal ordering, control of co-founders, if any. Output format, type of claim, attempted, descriptive, explanatory, causal, interpretive. Causal inference possible, yes. Limited, no. Third, degree of overreach, non-limited, significant. Fourth, remaining alternative explanations if causal language is used. Fifth, one analytical paragraph explaining the gap between design and claim, why this gap matters scientifically, what legitimacy risk arises. So here we will do the same. I will take this prompt here. We'll run it in Gemini, and we will input research question: how are MCS reconfigured during or alongside a growth phase? Design, so data structured will be interviews. Design, let's say it will be qualitative, I suppose. Sampling logic, anyone involved in the reconfiguration of the MCS. Intended claims, so the the claims, and I suggest we take the claims we had here. Findings to come here. So we remain consistent with ourselves. Temporal ordering, not decided yet. Controls of co-founders, unsure. And we'll see what comes out from this. As a scientific legitimacy examiner, I have evaluated the alignment between your empirical design and your intended claims, focusing specifically on the inferential leap from qualitative interviews to life cycle evidence. Type of claim attempted: explanatory causal, by using terms such as evidenced by and alongside to link MCS reconfiguration to a growth phase. The claim moves beyond the mere description of the process towards an explanatory model of development necessity. Causal inference possible? No, because it's qualitative. Degree of overreach, significant. Significant if you are intending to make a a strong theoretical claim sounding like a universal law of life cycle or management controls life cycle. Remaining alternative explanations. Since your design does not control for co-founders, several alternative drivers for MCS reconfiguration remain unaddressed. Isomorphism, changes driven by a desire to mimic best practices or industry leaders than mere actual growth needs. Interesting. Individual agency, a new CFO or consultant implementing their preferred system regardless of the life cycle stage. Interesting as well. External shocks, regulatory changes, macroeconomic shifts, or investor demands that coincide with but are not caused by the growth phase. Indeed, here we do not know if there is any other associated event or phenomenon that leads to reconfiguring the management control system. Scientific legitimacy analysis, the gap between your design and your claim lies in their attribution of necessity. While your interviews can expertly map their experience of change, they cannot scientifically evidence that their MCS evolved because of the growth phase. Without a decided temporal ordering, for instance, longitudinal tracking or mechanism to isolate the growth variable from the other organizational triggers, your claim of life cycle evolution remains a correlation observed through the lens of hindsight. This gap matters because it risks presenting a teleological fallacy. This means you might ascribe a rationale for doing something which is not proven. Assuming that because an organization grew and its system changed, the growth mandated the specific change. The resulting legitimacy risk is one of narrative circularity. Participants will naturally narrate their story as a logical progression, leading the researcher to discover a life cycle pattern that may actually be just an artifact of their interview's own retrospective sense making. So here it's because we didn't clarify the co-founders, so the co-founders and the temporality. So here, if you remember, let's do it this way. It will be clearer this way. So here we temporal ordering. We did not clarify this. So again, all this does not mean that the approach you're intending to adopt is wrong. All this means that you must clarify a number of issues, that you must ask yourself a number of questions before you start. So when you start, you do it knowingly. That's what we need to retain from this this prompt, this diagnosis. And lastly, the fourth one for tonight is with lexical precision and the subtle collapse. Here, last week we saw that the wording of the question already encodes the method. So the question leads naturally to a certain type of methods. When you have a question which is type how question, the methods that are suggested will be qualitative. If you have a question such as what if the impact of this on that, or what are the determinants, or what are the factors, then you are calling for quantitative methods. So that's the first thing. So here we saw early on by changing words that a single word can shift their entire architecture. And this is what we will see here. Conceptual and lexical compatibility as a single word might change everything, the course of the world. I mean, the course of your research and its whole consistency. And this is what we'll see now with this final prompt. But I think you have probably understood this already, as we have previously discussed the same prompt, slightly changing a few words here and there, and we saw that just changing one word was leading to different analysis. So here, conceptual lexical compatibility, 𝗬𝗢𝗢. You are a conceptual precision analyst. Task: examine whether the wording of my research question is epistemically compatible with my method. Do not propose rewording. Input, research question and method. Output format: words implying measurement, if any. Words implying causality, if any. Words implying interpretation, if any. Overall compatibility: coherent, fragile, incoherent. Fifth one, analytical paragraph, 6 to 10 lines explaining their epistemic expectations recreated by the wording, whether the method satisfied those expectations, and where conceptual tensions might appear. And we will do the same. But as we have seen early on, here we should not have too much of a mismatch, too much of misalignment. But let's see. Here back to Gemini. Input, research question: how are MCS reconfigured alongside company growth phase? And here I think alongside will be the word. Semi-structured interviews with anyone involved in the reconfiguration of the MCS. And we'll see. But I think alongside is the problematic word. Here, as a conceptual precision analyst, I have examined the linguistic and epistemic alignment of your research question against your chosen methodological approach. Okay. Words implying measurement, growth phase. In traditional management literature, this term implies an objective, quantifiable transition. For instance, revenue threshold, headcount, or time series data that can be measured against a benchmark. Yeah, do not quite agree, but why not? Words implying causality alongside, while softer than caused by, this preposition implies a temporal and structural synchronization. It suggests a functional relationship where the movement of one variable, growth, triggers or parallels a change in another MCS configuration. Words implying interpretation, how. This opens the door to processual explanation and the mechanics of action. Reconfigured suggests a deliberate, active process of shaping which aligns with the agency of those involved in the design. Overall compatibility, fragile. Conceptual I'm not totally okay with this, in particular as I do not personally totally agree with this analysis. Words implying measurement, growth phase. Here, it is probably true, but growth phase is also a phase where management considers that something is happening, and it's not necessarily objectified as it is suggested here. But let's see. It says, based on this, that compatibility is fragile. But conceptual precision analysis. The wording of the research question creates an epistemic expectation of synchronization. Well, it is true. Well, it is true, and this is more or less what you seem to be intending to do, seeing what happens in terms of controls when the company is growing. So yes, there is a synchronization. It suggests the researcher will demonstrate a direct link between a specific organizational state, growth, and a structural response. Not quite. However, your method, semi-structured interviews, is inherently designed to capture subjective perception and social construction, not objective phase alignment. The conceptual tension appears because growth phase is often treated as an external objective fact in the question, while the method treats it as a narrated experience. Consequently, the method may satisfy the how of the process, the mechanics of reconfiguration, but fails to satisfy the alongside, the proof of temporal or structural coordination with an objective life cycle stage. So let's try slightly differently. Okay, alongside during, so here I'm sure it will change everything. Your research against your methodological approach. So here, words implying measurement, growth phase. This term implies quantifiable, blah, blah, blah. During, in a research context, this temporal preposition implies a conditional or circumstantial relationship. It suggests that the phase acts as a container or a catalyst for the action of reconfiguration. Okay, it means there's a strong assumption you make. Okay. Words implying interpretation. How? This signifies an inquiry into process, sequence, and the black box of decision making. Okay. Reconfigured. This implies agency, design choices, and the intentional manipulation of organizational structure. Overall compatibility, fragile. I think it's partly because of growth and during, again. The wording of your research question creates an epistemic expectation of chronological synchronization. It suggests that the researcher will isolate the specific period of growth and observe the changes occurring within it. While your method, semi-structured interviews, is perfectly suited to explore the how, the logic of and actions of the designers, it is ill-equipped to objectively validate the during point. Interviews yield retrospective, reconstructed accounts where participants often tidy up history to match the current growth narrative. The conceptual tension arises because the question treats the growth phase as a stable, independent variable, while the method treats it as a subjective perception. Consequently, the method captures how people say they reconfigured systems when they felt they were growing, rather than a verifiable evolution occurring during a mathematically defined phase. And I think that's exactly what you're doing. That's exactly what you're doing. So I suggest we try last thing for tonight. We try, but we take just this. The method captures how, and then I'm pretty sure that with this we will have no problem. Let's see. And then I suggest after this we'll close tonight's session. Words implying measurement. None. The phrasing explicitly avoid objective metrics like revenue or headcount in favor of subjective states. Words implying causality. When. This serves as a temporal anchor rather than a direct causal driver, suggesting a correlation between a perceived state and a specific set of actions. Yeah, this makes sense. Words implying interpretation, how people say. This is the strongest interpretive marker, explicitly targeting narrative construction and espoused theory. Felt highlights the phenomenological experience of the participants rather than an external reality, which would be pretended to be objective. Reconfigured focuses on the participants' descriptions of their own agency, overall compatibility, coherence. Here we are. The wording of this research question creates a purely interpretive epistemic expectation. It signals that the researcher is not seeking an objective truth about organizational life cycles, but rather an understanding of sense-making and narrative construction amongst actors. The method of semi-structured interviews satisfies these expectations perfectly, as this is the primary tool for capturing how individuals retrospectively organize their experiences into a coherent story. Conceptual tension is virtually absent because the growth phase has been moved from an external variable to an internal perception. Felt they were growing. This alignment ensures that the data collected, what people say, is exactly what the question asks for, avoiding the trap of climbing to find objective structural shifts through subjective filters. Here, what we see with this prompt run twice is that wording is very important. Wording may result in incoherence, in apparent incoherence or inconsistencies, and therefore it's really important to make sure that the wording is consistent all over. So from the beginning, so this means from the research question, and you saw early on we had different ways of wording the research question, and so doing led to different types of consistency or levels of consistency or coherence. So first, how the research question is worded, how the theory is named, how the analytical focus is phrased, how data and methods are also called, and how claims are articulated. So here the vertical logic is the first thing where we can identify linguistic and semantic and lexical precision, and of course consistency. So at the end of the day, your method defines the borders of what you're allowed to claim. So, you can claim whatever you want, but if you want to be convincing, persuasive, you must make claims that are consistent with the methods you are using. And I would like to conclude on this idea. Coherence isn't visible when it exists, but it becomes visible when it collapses. And what we've done tonight with those 4 prompts was to test this coherence. And we saw that it is very easy to drift from something coherent to something less coherent. I'm not saying incoherent, but less coherent. So I hope this was helpful. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope, Shuhei, that indeed this exchange will be insightful for you, and I'm more than happy to have your input on this. But what I would like you to retain is that I took the example, the example of your thesis without, at my end, without being 100% clear with the wording. I mean, clear. My memory was not clear. I'm not saying that your wording was not clear. I on purpose did not take exactly word for word what you wrote, but how I remembered you wrote it, and we could see that this wording can this wording can reveal some weaknesses in the methodological approach, and therefore it's important, real important, thinking of this wording and making sure that everything is consistent all the way. So thank you very much for making it tonight. Thank you for also allowing me to use your case as an example. And so I wish you good luck and a lovely week, and I hope to see you again next Sunday. So bye to all, and see you very, very soon.